السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين به ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. جزاك الله خيرا, my dear respect brothers and sisters. I hope that we would make this gathering for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I hope that we would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would accept from us. Today, brothers and sisters, we're going to be talking about a very deep subject. Is that, and this is kind of an introductory subject to understanding the Sharia. I mean, there is when it comes to understanding the Sharia, it's much more deep. There are books and encyclopedias writing into this. What we're doing here, brothers and sisters, we're trying to get a surface understanding of how the Sharia is built on, what is, and how the ulama, the scholars, uh, you know, what are their tools for them to understand the Sharia. And this is something important, brothers and sisters, when it comes to an average person. And someone might ask, I'm just a normal guy. Do I need to understand all these deep things? I think it's important for any individual, at least to know the basics. So they could, when someone throw a misconception at you, if someone tried to make you doubtful of your religion, if someone is asking you a question so he could confuse you, you would have to at least have the tools that would enable you to understand or respond to them in the most appropriate way. So, brother and sister, today, بإذن ta'ala, part of our series of trying to, the source of reception and the path of understanding Islam. Today, we're going to be talking briefly to talk about what are the rules for understanding the Sharia بإذن ta'ala. Okay, so that's what we're going to start with بإذن ta'ala. So, brothers and sisters, okay, what are the rules for us to understand the Sharia? The most important thing, this is very important, brothers and sisters. It's a big importance for us to understand the Sharia. So, an individual, average Muslim, can avoid any sort of misconception or misunderstanding that might lead them into confusion, or possibly doubtful, or even possibly for them to commit a bid'ah, or might interpret text, or might make them have a corrupt understanding. So it's important for a Muslim to have these tools of understanding the Sharia. Okay, and I'm going to give you examples, contemporary examples of how some people might interpret the text based, because they don't have the basic tools of how the text should be understood. For instance, some people say, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا, don't get close to zina. Some people say, well, this does not apply to zina here, or adultery here. It does not mean having sex with any female. Meaning here that adultery means here in this ayah, meaning that if someone raped a woman. So this is the zina that is being mentioned in the Quran. Okay, so the problem here is the issue of understanding. He's inventing a new definition of what is zina. So, for instance, if someone, let's say zina here, or fornication here, means only, I mean, obviously in Islam rape is haram, but let's say someone is restricting the term zina here into only raping. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said وَالزَّانِي وَالزَّانِيَةُ فَاجْلِدُوا كُلَّ واحد منهما مئة جلدة? For the one the female who have committed zina, whip them if they committed a zina. Why? Meaning that regardless, the issue here is not whether someone have committed rape or not. The issue here of anyone who commit any sort of zina, it's haram in Islam. Okay, and the same thing here, when people, for instance, would come by and tell you, people sometimes would come to you and they would try to make you doubt in your religion, and these are common questions, brothers and sisters, that we get all the time. Okay, so it's important for us, in order for someone to interpret things in the right way, he has to make sure that to know how to interpret it. What are the rulings, and what are the tools that are being utilized by the scholars in order for them to arrive at the right interpretation that is intended in Islam. Okay, so this is something called usul al-fiqh, the essentials of fiqh. The essentials of fiqh are the knowledge of understanding the proper ways of interpreting the Sharia. Again, the essentials of the fiqh, or in Arabic we call it the usul al-fiqh. It is the knowledge of understanding the proper rules and the ways of interpreting the Sharia. So how could I extract a ruling from these, from the verses, from the Quran, from the Sunnah, that sort of thing. Yeah, and the thing is, and if you want to be a legitimate scholar or a truly knowledgeable person in the deen, you have to make sure that you at least know the basics of these things. Okay, you have to know. If a scholar must have almost everything about it, but yani, for someone who is knowledgeable in the deen, or who want to be able to defend his deen, he's obligated for at least for him to know the basics of the deen, the basics of these tools. Okay, all right. So going forward, now we're going into the big subject here. What are the rules of understanding the Sharia text? Okay, so let's go. We're jumping into it within Allah Ta'ala. Okay, now rule number one. Rule number one. Okay, is the rules related to understanding the goals of the Sharia. So the Sharia, brothers and sisters, our Sharia have goals. Yes, there are many rulings, many rulings, but a lot of these rulings you would not be able to understand their essence unless you know the goal of that rule. Like for instance, the Sharia, يعني, have for instance six goals. Like all of the Sharia, 6 or 7 goals. In order for and all the ruling come out of these goals. Like for instance, one of the goals of the Sharia is saving humanity, حفظ النفس. People would not die. حفظ النسل, that you would that you would save progeny, and that's why, for instance, homosexuality is haram in Islam, and that's why zina is haram in Islam, because otherwise, if zina was allowed, then I think it's everybody, you would not know who's the father of who, and etc. حفظ المال, that one of the essence of the Sharia is for you to keep your money and save your money, and that's why stealing is haram. That's why corruption is haram. That's why lying is haram. Etc. You see. So a lot of times, if you want to understand the basic ruling, you have to look beyond that and see what's the goal of that. For instance, I'm going to give you the most doubtful, one of the most doubtful questions that we get to ask all the time. For instance, people say, why Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did so many ghazawat here? He fought a lot of ghazawat. Why after him they wanted to conquer the land and etc. And with that, people would tend to associate Islam with violence. Brothers and sisters, the issue of these ghazawat or these wars is not in itself the essence. The essence of trying to deliver the deen. Like for instance, if there is a country have refused, at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, have refused Islam from being to reach the common individual, then that's something that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam took upon himself to wage a war on them. You see, so that's the issue. The issue here is making sure that people know about Islam. And this is brothers and sisters. Yani, if you ask anyone, like for instance, if here in yani, this is not just related to Islam. This is related to any other superpower. Like for instance, nowadays people say we want to spread democracy. For instance, why? Because they felt people want, whatever good things that they have, they want to spread it to other countries. And the same thing in Islam felt that it had something good for humanity and wanted to spread it for the rest of the people. So we're not inventing anything new when it comes to these things. Okay. Second thing, a second common misconception, for instance, people would say, so what's the goal of these words? For them to spread justice, spread Islam, spread the equality, and etc. You know, justice. Another common example is people say, well, why there is so much evil and temptation in this world? Couldn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have stopped evil from being existent? Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He can stop evil from being spread. Of course He can. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended for that to exist in this earth. Yeah, and Allah subhanahu, well, first of all, I'm just for me to make clear, not every according to our belief, not everything is 100% evil. because evil is relative. Evil is relative. So, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made things in this world that maybe would not be fair for other people, would sound not fair for other people. But why is that? Because that's this life, and life is not supposed to be fun. The goal, once we know the goal of this is what is life. Life is what is not for fun. Life is not for us to enjoy ourselves. Life is a test. So once we know the goal, life is a test, then we could explain why bad things happen to us. You understand? So the issue here is that once you understand the goal, the ruling would be justified. Okay, and that's the issue here, brothers and sisters. That's the issue here, brothers and sisters. We have to understand the goals of the rulings so we can understand the intent of these rulings. Bidnillahi ta'ala. Okay. Second thing, bidnillahi ta'ala, is that we have to understand the second way for us to understand the basis of our Sharia. Okay, is to understand the foundation of the fundamentalist rules. What does that mean? Meaning that, yani, for any rule in Islam, it there have to be there is foundation for this for this fundamentalist rulings in Islam. In order for us to extract that for each and every ruling, there have to be foundation that it stands on. Okay, and if you don't have these foundations, okay, you cannot understand, nor you could extract these rulings. The most important thing is that you have to have the Arabic language. Like, for instance, if someone does not understand the Arabic language, how could you be able to interpret the text of the Sharia? And then here we're not talking about just only i'rab, like knowing what is noun and what is a verb and what is the context of is it the sentence. No, here we're talking about you have to understand the context of the Arabic language in different situations. Okay, okay. So you have to have a fully understanding of the Arabic language in order before you be able to understand the foundations of the Sharia. Okay. Second thing is you have to understand that it's central to follow the understanding of the companions in order for understand the Sharia, because the way the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam understood the Sharia, that's the way we should be following. Otherwise, it'll be subjective, and anybody could say that their understanding is the correct way, and it'll be a chaos. But no, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, خير القرون قرني ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم. The best of generation is my generation, then the one after them, and then the other one after them. Okay. Yeah. If somebody having a question, please ask a question. Zubair bin Bashir, if you have a question, please do. Akhi. So this is related to our subject, inshallah. So you have to understand that the understanding of the Sharia, the understanding of the Sahaba is important and it's vital for you to understand the Sharia. Okay. Third thing is, one of the foundation of understanding the Sharia is that you have to understand that you have to know that there is a correct understanding of the Sharia. What is the right way of understanding the Sharia? Not anybody could interpret, anything anyone. Yeah. So there is an understanding how the Sahaba understood it and what is the right way of understanding the Sharia. Okay. And that's so these are the three basic foundations of understanding the Sharia. You have to have the Arabic language. You have to know how the Sahaba understood it, and you have to and there is a correct understanding among all of these things. Okay, so this is something very, very, very important. Okay. Third thing. Okay, there are three fundamental rules into understanding the Sharia. Okay. So what are the three? There are fundamental rules in understanding Sharia. Here I mentioned four, but there are actually three. Okay. So how are we going to understand the Sharia? Okay. If you open any book in usul al-fiqh, you will see 3 or 4 rules that it talks about. So this is kind of tells you how do you extract the ruling. Okay. The number one is they talk about sentences, but we're not going to talk about here. But here we're going to be talking about the evidence. So what is an evidence? What is considered to be an evidence in the Quran that we all the Muslims agree on? If something exists in the Quran, if something exists in the Sunnah, if something that is consensus, Okay, something is based on measurement, qiyas. What are some of the evidence that people might reject? Like for instance, the saying of a sahabi. Sometimes we take it, and sometimes we would not take it. What people before us, يعني other شرائع, يعني other religions have used to do in the past. If someone thought that this is okay, الاستحسان, you know. So all these things. So there are يعني evidence that we take for sure. No one doubts, like the Quran, the Sunnah, the consensus, the ijma', the qiyas, measuring things. And there are some evidences that people might not, يعني people differ on. The saying of a Sahaba, what previous shari'as have done before us, for Islam. If some of the tabi'een or some of the Sahaba have, for instance, said that this is better than this, then we could take it or we could reject it. Okay, so that's the very first way or second way of trying to extract the ruling, looking at what is an evidence. Okay, third, okay, it's the inference, like how, meaning that this is how, يعني, how do we extract the ruling? What are the tools that are needed to extract the ruling? Like for instance, if I want to extract water from the bottom of the earth, I have to have equipments. So here the same thing, that I have to have equipment, the right equipments to extract the ruling from the Sharia. Like for instance, I have to have the Arabic language. I have to know, like, what is the context of the Arabic language. I have to know the Quran. I have to know so much hadith. So there are tools that I have to understand. Okay. Third is what we call al mustadal. Okay, like the person who is the person who is extracting these rulings, the person who's inferring or trying to make the rulings. And technically, there are, and all the people who are trying to extract that ruling come down to one of two people. Okay, it's either you are mujtahid, yani people, you are coming, you're doing your own analysis, you're doing your own extracting, you are trying to, you have analyzed so many texts that now you have come up with something new that's called al-mujtahid, or al-muqallid, meaning that you are just copying your own scholar, your own teacher, so you're just a follower. Okay, so these are and even though I mentioned here four, but there are actually three sentences, are just are just mentioning the basic ruling of sentences, but here three. What is an evidence? What is how do you extract the evidence? Which what we call al-istidlal, okay, and al-mustadal, the extractor of the evidence, the person who's inferring that. Okay, and it could be either a muqallid, a copier, or a mujtahid, person who is doing it from the get go, from scratch. Okay, does that make sense? Someone have a question? Please ask me. I want to be asked that question. Okay, please. All right. Now, going into the next topic here, which are the basis of understanding the Sharia text. Okay, what are the ruling? The basis of understanding the Sharia text. Here we're jumping into more detailed subject here. Here, there is something, brothers and sisters, in Sharia called al-am wal-khas. Okay, al-am wal-khas. What it means, that you see sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking, and the terms are being used are for al-am, anyone, and sometimes the ruling only done for specific people. Okay, and you cannot apply what a ruling that is given to the general public, and you apply it to a specific people, nor you could do what is specific to the people to apply it to the general public. Also, you have to understand that sometimes in the Quran, terms that are, you would think it is general, it is, for instance, specific, but it's meant to be a general. Like for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhal insan, oh human. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the term here, oh, innal insan, like for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, innal insana lafi khusr, like for instance in Surah Al-Asr. Here, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is يعني, he's using the word insan, which is one individual, but what is it meant for? And even though it's khas, like it's a specific one, but what is it meant al insan? Here it means everyone, all human beings. Okay, okay. So that's يعني, even the person is only one person, but it's what is it meant here for everyone? Okay. So a lot of times you will see, and that's the problem, that where people might misinterpret the Quran. Like for instance, there are some ayat are meant for the general, everyone, and some ayat are only meant for a specific type of people. Sometimes you would, it sounds general, but it's meant for it specific. And sometimes there are specific, but it's meant for it for everyone. Like for instance, here insan one, but it's meant for everyone. You know. So and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala he said what he said. إن الإنسان لفي خسر. يعني إنسان in at lost. Okay, so but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now gives an exception. See how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala it's a general for everyone, but he gives an exception who is not at loss. إن الإنسان لفي خسر. Human is at loss. General, all humans are at loss. But what are the exceptions? إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات, except the people who believe, who does good deeds. Okay. Another example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الذين قال لهم الناس إن الناس قد جمعوا لهم فاخشوهم فزادهم إيمانا وقالوا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الذين قال لهم الناس, the ones who the people. So the people, the term people here, what is it? People, when someone say people, who's like, oh, if all the people, but no. Here it meant a specific group. You see, so you have to understand what the intent of the Quran, and here it goes more specific. Yeah, here Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, the term "an-nas," people, is a general term, but here it meant for it is something, a specific type of people. إن الناس الذي قال لهم الناس إن الناس. So it even gets more specific. A group of people who told a group of people about a group of people. Even so, there are three groups of people here, but the term is being used. What is general? General. You see, so that's why it's important, brothers and sisters, that we to understand the context and the meaning and the ruling of, is it this is something general or is it something specific? Okay, so this is very, very, very important, and many people, brothers and sisters, have fallen into yani, misinterpretation and incorrect ruling because of this, unfortunately. Okay, like for instance, for instance, you will see that you will see that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would talk about يعني, certain things, and you would know that the exceptions by just by sensation. يعني Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might talk about something in general, but your senses tell you it's not everything. It's not obliged to everything. For instance, let me give you an example. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, the following: تدمر كل شيء بإذن ربها. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about punishment of when he punished people who disobeyed him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that the winds, what did it do? It destroyed each and everything. So even though it says it destroyed each and everything, but does that mean that it destroyed each and everything? No. Yeah, because our by common sense, we know that it did not destroy the earth, all of the earth. It did not destroy the sky. So even though it says كل شيء, everything, but based on our feelings and common sense, we know that it didn't destroy everything. For instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gave us another example in the Quran that you would know the exceptions by common sense. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Allahu khaliqu kulli shay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the creator of everything. So does that mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala literally created everything, even Himself? No. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything, kulli shay, everything. But did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create even himself? No. So by common sense again, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create himself. So sometimes exceptions are known by feelings, by common sense. Okay. And يعني, but and anyone would know, by just utilizing their intellect, for instance. Okay. Sometimes exceptions in the Quran, like, so there are rulings, like I said, rulings that are meant a general ruling for everyone, but there are exceptions, and that's why you cannot apply a general ruling on the exceptions, nor you can apply the exception to the ruling. Like, for instance, every day we know that it's if someone, you're not allowed to cross a red light, right? Everyone. Why? Because this is the general ruling by the government that you're not allowed to cross a red light. Okay. But does certain people are allowed to cross the red light? Yes. Like, for instance, the police officer. Can the police officer cross the red light? Yes, he can. An ambulance, can the ambulance cross a red light? Yes. So you cannot apply what is general on the exceptions. No, you could apply what is the exceptions on the general. And then there are plenty of examples of that. Like, for instance, you will see in the Quran. Okay, you will see in the Quran there are sometimes an exceptions. The Quran itself gives its own exceptions. Like, for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوء, that the woman, the iddah of the woman is 3 months. Like, after يعني, a woman, after she is divorced, she's not allowed to get married for 3 months. Okay. But in the same Quran gives you an exception. Like, for instance, the Quran said, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نكحت المؤمنات ثم طلقتموهن من قبل أن تمسوهن فما عليكم من عدة تعتدونها. That if you marry a woman and you did not touch her, then there is no iddah. Okay. So but before it says that anyone who is divorced, she have a iddah of 3 months. But except here, if the woman did not really, if the man did not touch a woman. So yes, sometimes there is an exception in the Quran, make an exception for itself. Sometimes you will see, for instance, the exceptions in the Hadith. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala would give an exception in the Hadith of an ayah from the Quran. Like, for instance, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says in the Quran, يوصيكم الله في أولادكم للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين. Like inheritance, a man gets twice as a woman. Okay. Or the inheritance, and anybody get inheritance. Okay. But is there exceptions to this rule? Yes. Like, for instance, the prophets, the sons and the daughters of the prophets, they don't inherit anything. Like, for instance, Fatima radiallahu anha, she did not inherit anything from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that prophets, they don't inherit, they don't give inheritance. Everything they own is donated. You see. So that's an exception to the rule. Okay. You will see, for instance, hadith have a general ruling, and the exceptions are in the ayah. And sometimes you will see a hadith it's general, and another hadith makes an exception. Like, for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hadith, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that for anybody who have a garden that is irrigated by the rain, okay, it's zakat is 10%. Okay. And another hadith comes in and tells you, well, as long as the farm produced that much fruit, then you're allowed to give zakah. So again, you will see. So again, sometimes the general ruling here, brothers and sisters, is what? That sometimes you'll see a general ruling in the Quran, and where do you see the exceptions in the Quran? Sometimes you see a general ruling in the Quran. Where do you see the exceptions in the Hadith? Sometimes you see a general ruling in the Hadith. Where do you see the exceptions in the Quran? Sometimes you see a general ruling in the Hadith, and then you see the exceptions also in the Hadith. So the point here, brothers and sisters, that يعني it's in order for us to extract the rulings, in order for us to extract the rulings, we have to know everything that comes about that is related to that ruling. Otherwise, what's going to happen? People's going to make up their own يعني rulings based on the short thing that they understand. Unfortunately, that's what happened here. A lot of times, people fall into problems and misconceptions, and sometimes people could commit bid'ah or make an inappropriate ruling, and etc. You see. So that's يعني some يعني the rulings of al-am wal-khas, the general and the exceptions, the general and the exceptions. You cannot apply what is general to the exception to the general. That's the basis of here, inshallah. Okay. The next thing here. Okay. The next topic we're going to be talking about is what is absolute and what is restricted. Okay. So let me give you an example here. What is absolute and what is restricted? When I say, for instance, give a present to a student, do I give any restrictions here? Like, did I restrict anyone here? No, I just said that give a gift to any student. Okay, but when I say, for instance, give a gift to a student who have an A, did I restrict? Yes, I restrict. I said only give a gift to a student who have an A. But in the first example, I did not give any restrictions. Okay, and that's the problem here, brothers and sisters. Sometimes you will see in the Quran it restricts itself, and sometimes it didn't. And you have to understand how to apply the restrictions based on the verses. Okay, I'm going to give you an example so you can at least get an idea. Okay, for instance, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says in some ways for you to repent, فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ. Okay, فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ, that you would free a slave. And another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ, that the slave have to be a believer. You see? So sometimes you will see the restrictions in another ayah. And the scholars would have to know whether this restriction apply to the rulings or not. You know? Like for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that يعني الوضوء, like when we make wudu, okay, فامسحوا بوجوهكم وأيديكم منه. Like for instance, when you do, like for instance, a tayammum, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says فامسحوا, that you just rub, okay, وجوهكم وأيديكم, okay, your hands and your face. Okay, another ayah when it talks about the wudu, okay, فاغسلوا بأيديكم إلى المرافق, that you would wash your hands until the مرفق. So does that mean that when we are making tayammum, it should be just our hands, or should be our hands to the elbows? You see, and again, you have to understand what applies. Obviously, in here, when it comes to tayammum, and some of the scholars said that only you make tayammum with your hands, not all the way to your elbows. But there are some scholars who said otherwise. But the point here is that sometimes you will see something that is absolute and sometimes is restricted, and you have to understand what is restricted cannot be applied to anything that is absolute. Okay. The last thing, inshallah, is to understand what is a spoken, okay, and what is intelligible. Like meaning that sometimes that what you might think is the intent of the text, but sometimes it's understood differently. Like for instance, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ, don't tell your parents off. Okay, what is understood here? Don't tell your parents off, or don't tell them off, as disobeying them. But what is the understanding? The word where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade us from saying off to our parents. But also what understood from it, and what is the intent of it, is that you don't respect them, you don't disobey them, you don't yell at them, you don't have an attitude with them. That's the intent of the word "uff." Okay, the intent is the Quran only say "uff," but what's the intent? What is the intention? What is the goal? Is all the things that I mentioned. No? Another example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إن الذين يأكلون أموال اليتامى ظلما إنما يأكلون في بطونهم نارا. Those who eat the money of the orphans, indeed they eat indeed they eat fire in their stomach. Okay. So what about someone said, well, I'm not going to eat their money, I'm just going to waste it, or I'm going to give it to someone else who does not deserve it. See, the text here says what? Only eat. But what is the intent? Intent that you don't eat it yourself, you don't waste it, you don't give it for someone who does not deserve it. You see? Sometimes the opposite is true. The Quran only talks about one scenario, but what also understood from it is the opposite is true. Like for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة فإن طبن لكم عن شيء منه نفسا فكلوه هنيئا مريئا. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that when you give a woman a mahar, her dowry, if a woman give her husband part of that dowry as a gift, and out of her own will, and she's satisfied with that, it's okay. But also what's also understood from this, that it's not okay to take from her without her being not happy with it. So a man, is haram for him to take out of the dowry of the woman, of the woman was not did that out of her own will. But the Quran says, the Quran said, do not take from her. No, the Quran only mentioned that take from her if she is willing and she is happy and she is okay with it. But the opposite is true, in which that a man not allowed to take from his own woman unless she if she does not feel comfortable, or she's not satisfied with it. So all of this, so here, brothers and sisters, we talked about many important terms. We talked about, for instance, what is المنطوق والمفهوم, what is a text spoken, and what is the intent of that text. What is المطلق والمقيد, what is restricted and what is absolute. We talked about what is عام والخاص, what is general and what is exception. You see, all these things, brothers and sisters, are the ways and the tools for us to understand the Sharia. I hope that you guys have benefit from this. If I said anything that is good, it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet. If I said anything inappropriate for myself and Shaitan, جزاكم الله خير لحسن معكم. سبحانك وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين عملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير.